What's going on, guys? Farzin Vasugian here with you for another episode of the Chiefs Zone podcast. Hope you're all doing well. Hope everyone's having a great Monday. Hope your 2025 is going well. 2 weeks in. Wild card weekend wrapping up. The final game is taking place today in about 40 minutes. And we'll be out of here before that. Not going to be a very long podcast. I'll talk about the Chiefs and the Texans matchup. We now have the date and the time for that game. Going to talk about the Chiefs and that matchup a little bit. Going to give you guys some thoughts on the wild card weekend. Obviously, cannot discuss tonight's game as a summary because it hasn't happened yet. But we can go over some of the other 5 games, and I'll give you guys some quick thoughts on that. So all of that here on this episode of the Chiefs Zone podcast. Like I said, not a very long podcast because we already did a podcast kind of previewing this game on Sunday rather, yesterday, when we learned who the opponent would be once the Broncos fell to the Buffalo Bills. And since then, we have now learned the date and time. Going to talk some more about that game, more from the Chiefs side of things than what we need to happen. And just to give you guys an idea about what's coming up this week on the Chiefs Zone podcast and just podcasting, live streaming in general, we're going to be doing a podcast tomorrow. Zach is going to join me, and so will Mark Van Sickle from KCMO. Zach has done the Chiefs Zone podcast with me in the past. I realized I haven't had them for a Chiefs Zone podcast or a live stream all season long. So usually I have them a couple of times a year. So definitely going to bring them on, and we'll chat it up like we always do. So it's going to be another shorter podcast tomorrow. So make sure you guys join me for that. And then Wednesday, I'll be doing Farzcast with Melody. We're going to be bringing Farzcast back. I was going to ask, is that show extinct with the dinosaurs? No, it is not. It is not. It's just, it is on an inconsistent schedule. I'll say that now. It's always been, it's one of those just, hey, whenever we have time, we do that kind of thing. And then Thursday, we'll be back for the Chiefs Zone podcast. We will break down the game between the Chiefs and the Texans. I'll give you guys my score prediction for that game, and we'll also preview some of the other divisional round matchups that'll take place over the weekend. And then the Red Friday live chat, that'll take place sometime Friday early evening. So all of that coming your way this week on the Chiefs Zone and Farzcast. So all of that going to be a lot of fun for you guys to check out. I want to let you know this podcast is brought to you by SeatGeek. SeatGeek is where I go to for all of my ticketing needs, whether it's sports, concerts, whatever it may be. Obviously, we've got the NFL playoffs. We've still got some of the college football postseason and so many other sports going on right now. But if you want to catch the Chiefs and the Texans game, and I'll tell you right now, playoff tickets, it ain't a cheap price. But if you want to go to SeatGeek.com, pick your tickets from there. And hey, like I said, playoff tickets, I mean, they're up there when it comes to the value, the price. So you can save $20 off if you're a new customer. You can use my promo code Farzin and save $20 off your first purchase from SeatGeek. Go to SeatGeek.com, pick your tickets, and at checkout, use my promo code Farzin if you're a new SeatGeek customer, and you can save $20 off your first order from SeatGeek. And you can go check out the Chiefs and the Texans on Saturday. Bundle up, though, because it is going to be very, very cold from what I've read. But we'll discuss that later on in the week. I want to know how you guys are feeling about the Chiefs going into Saturday's game, because I'm seeing a lot of people in and outside of Kansas. It's funny because I got comments for several weeks. Oh, the Chiefs, they're resting all their starters. It's going to be a 24-day layoff, or it's going to be a long time before they come back. And I've heard nothing about how, they're going to be rusty and they're going to be one and done. And now all of a sudden, everyone's saying this is the easiest game you could ask for. I mean, listen, I don't like the term easiest game or easy game in the playoffs. I just don't believe in that. Unless the Texans were just decimated with injuries in the previous game and came away with a win. I just don't believe in that kind of thing. I've said this before, but I'll say it again. The 2 times the Giants won the Super Bowl with Eli Manning, they were viewed as the easy team that everyone wanted to play. And I think we all saw how that turned out. Same thing with Nick Foles and the Eagles. Everybody wanted to play Nick Foles and the Eagles. Nobody thought that they would pose as any kind of threat. Well, they went on to beat the Patriots of all teams in the Super Bowl. And then, of course, last year, the Chiefs, I think another team that a lot of people looked at and said, nah, yeah, the Chiefs, they're in the playoffs because they're in a weak division, but they're easy to beat in the playoffs because everyone just thought that they were going to shoot themselves in the foot with the drops and the penalties and all those things. And yet here we saw the Chiefs went on to win the Super Bowl. Again, the Chiefs were the easy team last year, which was weird because they had the number 3 seed. They won 11 football games. Maybe not the Travis Kelce acknowledged it today when he was on the Pat McAfee show. He said that this year they're finding ways to win football games and win them in different ways, which I agree with. And then he said last year the team dealt with losing football games. Okay, 11-5. I guess statistically speaking, that's the worst regular season under Patrick Mahomes. But 11-5. I mean, listen, if the Raiders or the Giants or the Patriots, I mean, teams that have struggled immensely in the last few years, if they were to ever go 11-5, I mean, they would be thrilled with that. And by the way, I'm still in pre-2022 mode because I said 11-5. It was 11. The Chiefs were 11-6 last year. So, okay, I get it. Throwing an extra loss there, it kind of feels like a lot. But that is what the Chiefs dealt with last year. So, yeah, I appreciate you, Blake. Yeah, I'm still in pre-2022 mode. I'm still not used to the 17-game format, but neither here nor there. So my point here is, I think when you look at this Chiefs football team, yeah, the standard is high. And listen, let me just say this right now. If the Chiefs do win this football game, they will have gone to the AFC Championship game 7 years in a row. And all 7 years Patrick Mahomes has been the starting quarterback, they will have reached the AFC Championship game. And I know that in Kansas City, reaching the AFC Championship game, that's not the standard anymore. I mean, the goals are much higher than that, especially this year with history on the line and a chance to do something that's never been done before. But you can't take away the fact that someone started all 7 years at the quarterback position, which we know is the position that's talked about the most. It's a position that's valued the most in the NFL. And the Chiefs, specifically with Patrick Mahomes, have reached it every single time with Mahomes. I mean, that is insanity. Again, I understand that's no longer the standard, but you can't take away the fact how impressive that is. 7 times reaching the AFC Championship. Listen, over the years, and I don't know about you guys, but as a Chiefs fan, I'd watch AFC. I hated watching AFC Championship games. I hated it because you would see Jim Nantz award the Lamar Hunt Trophy to the Patriots or the Colts or the Steelers. Every once in a while, you see another. What AFC teams did we see other than the Steelers, Colts, and Patriots in the Super Bowl? I mean, there's got to be a team I'm missing. So the Broncos, yeah, they did it twice with Peyton Manning, but I just hated watching other teams get the Lamar Hunt Trophy. I mean, listen, the Lombardi Trophy is far bigger than the Lamar Hunt Trophy, no question about it. But I've just got to imagine that for Clark Hunt, the Lamar Hunt Trophy has to mean more to him. I would not say that about the 15 other owners in the AFC. Absolutely not. But for Clark Hunt, I mean, you can understand why the Lamar Hunt Trophy would mean more than the Lombardi Trophy. I'm not saying the goal is not to get Lombardis, but I mean, that's a trophy that has his father's name on it. A man who did so much for not just the Kansas City Chiefs, but the AFL and the NFL in general. So, again, there's nothing easy about reaching the AFC Championship game. And you're doing it against a Texans team, which a lot of people are writing off here. I guess Rex Ryan's doubting everyone, which is interesting to me. But the I guess Rex Ryan said he doubted the Texans against the Chargers, and he's going to doubt them again against the Chiefs. I guess I am too, because I picked the Chargers last week, and I'm picking the Chiefs this week. But I don't think it's going to be an easy game like so many people are saying it's going to be. When these two teams met last time, the Chiefs were 1.5 point betting favorites. Last I checked, the Chiefs were 8.5 point betting favorites. I know it's 8 points and some other sports books. I think that line is a bit high. It's a bit high. And listen, I mean, that's not to say the Chiefs can't win by 2 possessions. I just think that's a little bit of a disrespect to the Texans football team. Let's just look at the last time these two teams played. It was 27-19. It was an 8 point game. Now, I guess from a betting standpoint, yeah, the Chiefs covered the 1.5 point spread at the time. But it wasn't easy. And even without Tank Dell, the Texans still found a way to do some things in this football game. Defensively speaking, my biggest concern about the Texans defense and also the Steelers defense, who they face 5 days later, they're top 5 in sacks and they're top 5 in takeaways. And I'm looking at the front line for the Houston Texans. That's a really good front line, man. That is, I mean, outside of Chris Jones, if you were to ask me, would you trade Kansas City's edge rushers for Houston's edge rushers? I mean, listen, I love George Karlaftis. I'm kind of starting to wonder if FAU is gradually becoming a bust. Yes, he has flashes, but that's not what you draft the first round draft pick for. I would flip Kansas City's edge rushers, including Karlaftis, for Houston's edge rushers, 1,000%. You look at what Houston has, and Danielle Hunter and Will Anderson. That's one of the best front lines in the NFL. Defensively speaking there. And the reason I'm talking about this right now is, first of all, the last time these two teams played, they only got 1 sack, Houston that is, on Kansas City. And that was on a linebacker blitz from Christian Harris. So none of the offensive linemen were statistically charged with a sack allowed in that game. What's my point with this? What is the offensive line going to look like, as you guys see in the title of this podcast here? Because I said last week that the Chiefs need to keep Joe Thuney at left tackle for the remainder of the playoffs and also for 2025. Now, the 2025 thing, I'll just keep it really short here. Kansas City just hasn't gotten it right at the left tackle position, no matter who they got, whether it's Orlando Brown, Donovan Smith, DJ Humphries. And listen, it's not for a lack of effort. I just mentioned the names. They're going out there. Kingsley Suamataia. They're trying to get anyone and everyone to try to solve that left tackle glaring hole right there. They just haven't gotten it right. Thankfully, they have this beast named Joe Thuney on the offensive line. And I saw a lot of people suggest the idea of moving Joe Thuney to left tackle, and I wasn't really too fond of the idea. After seeing what I've seen from Thuney at left tackle, man, again, considering the arm length not ideal for a left tackle, Joe Thuney's your best left tackle since Eric Fisher. Since you cut Eric Fisher after the 2021 season. Or 2020 season, I should say. Cut him in the 2021 offseason. So let's table the 2025 season discussion, but let's just talk about the postseason for now. Because I got a lot of pushback from this, and a lot of people were telling me that the Chiefs should move Thuney back to left guard and have Humphries play left tackle. And listen, I was buying stock on DJ Humphries coming to Kansas City. I was calling for this for a long time. When word got out there from the insiders, the national insiders, that he had been medically cleared and that his agent was trying to get the word out to the teams, I was calling for this to happen. Unfortunately, DJ Humphries, he has not lived up to the hype. I understand he was on the shelf for almost all of 2024, recovering from his injury and surgery there. But his first game back, I can let that slide until he suffered that injury where he missed a few games. And then he came back and he played against the Broncos, did not look very good in that football game. And that was a good test for DJ Humphries, because you're facing Nick Bonito and a Denver pass rushing unit that I would say the pass rushing unit is the best in the NFL. They lead the NFL in sacks by a very wide margin. And I know they got their asses kicked by Buffalo, but you can't deny the fact. I mean, Josh Allen was sacked just once in the last, 5 or 6 games. Yesterday, Josh Allen was sacked twice, and that's not a lot. And listen, Josh Allen has been having a tremendous season, doesn't get sacked much, doesn't commit a lot of turnovers. In fact, Buffalo as a team have committed the fewest turnovers all year long. But when you look at this Chiefs football team and DJ Humphries, first of all, the game he played against the Chargers, that Sunday night game where Matthew Wright doinked it in, which, by the way, we've been seeing a lot of doinks this season. I don't know why. Those footballs have definitely gotten to know those goalposts this year. But against the Chargers, 5 pressures allowed in that game. 5 pressures allowed in his first impression, his debut with the Chiefs. He came back for the Denver game, and I get it. You know, there were a lot of backups on the field. But he allowed 6 pressures in that game. And that just was not a good look for him. And I get he's going up against Nick Benito, but there are a lot of good edge rushers in the playoffs right now. One of them being Danielle Hunter, who the Chiefs are going to face on Saturday. Look, the time for experimenting the left tackle position and who you put where, that's all over, man. You do not do that in the playoffs, because I do think it's one of those situations where every single snap, every single series, every single drive matters. Is there a possibility Andy Reid would test the waters for a drive? Yeah, I'm not really fond of that idea though, because you're in the playoffs, man. Every single drive matters, and I think what have we said all year long, especially in a year where the Chiefs are trying to make history, you're going to get every team's best shot. We've seen a lot of close games this year with the Chiefs, especially in games that, quote unquote, shouldn't have been close. But that's the way things have panned out. And the Chiefs have definitely been challenged to earn those 15 wins that they got this year, which is obviously the best in the AFC. But I'm just looking right now. I don't know if I really want to see DJ Humphries go up against Danielle Hunter. I hope I'm wrong. I mean, I would love to have Tooney back at his natural position and for Humphries to go back into his Pro Bowl form and help this Chiefs offensive line dominate. But I'm just, being realistic and based off what we've seen, and I know it's not much, but in that Denver game, let me pull that up one more time, 25 pass blocking snaps. He allowed 6 pressures. And again, I understand this was a preseason type of game for the Chiefs, whereas the Broncos, they had to win or they were done. I get that, but part of this game was to see how DJ Humphries was going to look and how you could potentially use him in the playoffs. And if we're just being completely honest, he absolutely failed that test in Week 18 against the Broncos in Denver. So I do have that big concern right now going into this game if the Chiefs were to put DJ Humphries at left tackle. Joe Tooney, listen, I don't think Joe Tooney was playing, like the best left tackle in the league. But for a guy who's played interior offensive line his entire career, I mean, you got to give credit to him. And again, I get it. When you're doing the comparison thing here, the standard's not very high here. The bar's pretty low. But Joe Tooney has by far been your best left tackle since you cut Eric Fisher in the 2021 offseason. I mean, there have been moments that Orlando Brown, he had a couple of games where he looked really good, back-to-back games. I can't remember if that was in 2022 or 2021. Donovan Smith, I thought he was solid in the playoffs, but just overall body of work, you have not seen a consistently good left tackle since the 2021 season outside of Joe Tooney. And again, I get just a few games with Joe Tooney, but he kind of got his feet wet with Myles Garrett, gave up 10 pressures in that game. That's a lot. But then he faced Danielle Hunter, played better, did better against a solid Steelers defense. I mean, he has gotten better at that position. And by the way, those were 3 games in 11 days. It was that stretch right there. How do you guys feel? I haven't read a lot of comments tonight. In fact, I haven't read any. I see there are a bunch on queue here. Just skimming through what I've missed already here. But I want to know from you guys, what do you want to see at that left tackle spot? John says, what about right tackle? I mean, listen, it's Jawaan Taylor. You got to manage that for hopefully 3 more games. I do think the Chiefs have to seriously consider doing something about Jawaan Taylor. But if you have the left tackle spot solved, which I think they do right now, I think the whatever issues you have at right tackle are manageable. I mean, listen, Jawaan Taylor, there are moments where he's just a bad pass blocker. He does have his good moments as a pass blocker as well. The penalties are certainly an issue. Nick says, no way, we need Joe Thuney at guard. Humphrey, I think he meant Humphreys, is a better tackle than Caliendo is at guard. Okay, but see, I disagree, Nick. I mean, and again, I know it's just 2 games with Humphreys, but in the 2 games we've seen him, he just hasn't been very good. Like at all. 11 pressures in 2 games. Like what if Thuney struggles? If Humphrey struggles against Benito, how's he going to do against Danielle Hunter? Because when you look at Danielle Hunter and Will Anderson, it's kind of like when the Chiefs had Tamba Hali and Justin Houston, 2 very good elite pass rushers, 1 on each side. And it was basically a race to see who could get to the quarterback first between the 2 guys. That's kind of how it is in Houston with Danielle Hunter and Will Anderson. And Justin Herbert will definitely tell you about it. He certainly had his problems with that defensive front. And I think the Chargers have a very solid offensive line too. And let me just say this about Mike Caliendo. I don't think Mike Caliendo is playing like the best left guard in the game today. No, not at all, not even close. I know a lot of people love to use the Pro Football Focus grade, the metric. First of all, that is extremely subjective there. I don't agree with all of their grades. I've said this on the last podcast. I'll say it again quickly. Aaron Rodgers once threw 5 touchdowns against the Chiefs back in 2015, and PFF gave him like a 2.2 grade. And the reason for that was because he threw an interception at one point, and then he threw an interception on a free play when the Chiefs jumped offside. It's like, how are you going to put a dent on this guy's grade because he threw a pick on a free play? Like, it just didn't make sense to me. I remember Patrick Mahomes once threw 5 touchdowns in a week 1 game against the Cardinals a couple of years ago, and he was graded as the 7th best quarterback. You can't convince me that a quarterback that threw 5 touchdown passes was the 7th best in terms of his grade that way. Listen, PFF is good for some things. Their grades, it's a nice reference, but to me, that's not like the gatekeeper of all things football knowledge. It's just not. Michael's asking, do you think they're going to go DJ Williams Saturday? I don't know. I think Andy Reid wants to. You meant DJ Humphreys. I think Andy Reid wants to move Thuney back to left guard, and I can understand that. That's his natural position. But do you really want to let Patrick Mahomes get beat down? I'm telling you guys right now, if the Chiefs do not have a viable option at left tackle, that could be what prevents the Chiefs from three-peating. And I know what you're all going to say. Farzine, the Chiefs had a bad left tackle and a bad right tackle each of the last 2 years, and they won the Super Bowl. Cool. Awesome. I don't want to test that theory again to see if it'll work again. I mean, if you have bad left tackle play and you find a way to three-peat, cool. I think that says a lot more about Patrick Mahomes, but I still do not want to put that to the test. I just don't. I mean, look at Joe Burrow. Yeah, he put up great numbers this year with a bad offensive line. If he had a great offensive line, he'd put up even better numbers. Because even though Burrow had a great season, statistically speaking, it obviously prevented the Bengals from reaching the playoffs. And I've seen a lot of Bengals fans online say that, yeah, sure, you can talk about the defense, but I've seen some people say if the offensive line was just even better, above average even, that it would have made a difference in some games this year. And I don't disagree. I think if you improve the defense, it'd be even, they could probably compete with the Chiefs for the number 1 seed, but that's, a topic for an alternate universe. My point is, you got to protect your quarterback, especially the blind side. A lot of you guys are saying keep Thuney at left tackle. See, this is my thing, because you're playing a team that you played, what was it? A little over 3 weeks ago. And the Chiefs offensive line did very well in that game. Thuney did allow, and if I can find the right tab here, Thuney allowed 4 pressures in that game. That's not great, but when you consider that it's a new position to him, especially at the time, and he was facing Danielle Hunter, 4 pressures, you can live with that. Juwan Taylor allowed 3, Mike Caliendo allowed 3. The interior offensive line with Creed Humphrey, Trey Smith, as good as it's always been. Smith allowed just 1 pressure. Creed Humphrey allowed 0 because that's the kind of center he is. Puts the oomph in Humphrey. But Joe Thuney, listen, again, I'm not saying he's playing like the best left tackle between weeks 15 to 17. I'm not saying that at all. But he's been your best left tackle since you cut Eric Fisher. I think you got to leave Joe Thuney at left tackle. And I still think the Chiefs can find a way to utilize the run game. When the Chiefs ran the football against Houston in that game, they didn't really have a lot of problems doing so. Now, they threw the ball a lot more. In fact, if you look at Patrick Mahomes, the amount of passes he had in that game, he threw the ball 41 times. There are only 3 other games where Patrick Mahomes threw the ball more. 46 against the Raiders on the Black Friday game. That's the most all year long. 42 against Denver. And then 44 in overtime against the Bucs. So that game where they threw the ball 41 times, didn't run it as much. But when you look at the box score and everything in that game, Chiefs didn't do a bad job of running the football there. Patrick Mahomes scrambled a few times in that game. Kareem Hunt ran 5 yards a carry. The Chiefs as a team ran 4.4 yards per rush. So it's not like the Chiefs were in trouble. Pacheco, he ran 9 times for 26 yards, which wasn't good. But in general, the Chiefs as a team ran pretty well. So I have no issue if the Chiefs want to leave, and I don't think any Chiefs fan should either, if they want to leave Thuney at left tackle and Caliendo at left guard there, because it worked against the Texans before. Now, I understand this. Every game is a different game. And the Texans, they're obviously not going to come into this game trying to do the exact same thing as last time, because they'll lose again. They're going to mix it up. They definitely want to come with a different approach and have a different game plan to attack Kansas City and try to pull off this upset, of course. But I just feel like it's in the best interest of the Chiefs, and for crying out loud, your quarterback, to have Thuney at left tackle. I think that's the most important thing right now. Again, I'm just surprised there's been a lot of pushback on the left guard conversation here. Again, I'm not here to make a case and say Caliendo is the best left guard or a top 5 guard, but he's doing enough to help you get the job done. Like that needs to be pointed out. Maybe the running game's not going to be there. I'm not saying that's okay. But if you're the Chiefs, is that your bread and butter ultimately? And I don't want to discredit what Pacheco's done in the past for the Chiefs, or what Kareem Hunt has done coming back to the Chiefs this year. Kareem Hunt's been key for the Chiefs, especially in short yardage situations, which is something that the Chiefs have struggled with for so many years. It drives me nuts. But I'm just looking at this football team right now. Why did you bring Hollywood Brown? Why did you bring Xavier Worthy? Because you had so many issues with the wide receivers you had last year. Why did you bring back Juju Smith-Schuster? He wasn't in his Pro Bowl form like he was with the Steelers the first time he was with the Chiefs, but he's done some good things before, and he likes the offense that the Chiefs operate in. And by the way, wasn't it Matt Nagy who was trying to make a case for the Chiefs to go get Juju after he was cut by the Patriots? What did that tell you? Matt Nagy was the quarterback's coach last time Juju was on the team. So surely Patrick Mahomes had a conversation with Nagy and said, hey, look, we got to go get this guy. Look at why you got DeAndre Hopkins. A part of it was because the injuries that have been taking place at the wide receiver spot with Rice and Hollywood. But the other part is you were not content with who you had with Sky Moore, McCole Hardman. Even though I like McCole Hardman's skill set, we just haven't seen him utilize that full body of work over time. The group of wide receivers that was thin at the time. You bring DJ Humphries in, and Kansas City started playing better football, started taking care of the football better. And I'll get into that shortly too, because I want to touch on that a little bit in a moment here. But I just think that the way the offensive line was operating with Tooney at left guard and Caliendo, Tooney at left tackle and Caliendo at left guard, and then the other positions being what they were. I know not John Taylor, Wanye Morris has played a little bit of right tackle, especially in that Texans game. I mean, listen, I think this is a Chiefs team that played their best football. Andy Reid said it after the game against the Texans, and I said it too, doing the post-game podcast here. That was the best Chiefs game of the year. And the Chiefs followed it up with an even better game 5 days later. But let's stick with the Texans game from that mid-December date. And what was that? It had to have been the 21st. Yeah, because they played a few days later against the Steelers on Christmas. When you just look at the Chiefs, that was Hollywood Brown's first game with the Chiefs. That was his Chiefs debut, his first game coming back from injury. Xavier Worthy was getting better and better each week. He caught 7 passes for 65 yards. Hollywood Brown caught 5 for 45. Samaje Perine had 50 yards off 3 catches. DeAndre Hopkins, who's gotten more and more involved, 4 for 37. Travis Kelce had 5 catches for 30 yards. And I know Travis Kelce isn't putting the monster type numbers he used to have, but when you have all of these guys I mentioned here, Worthy, Brown, Hopkins, Kelce, Perine, we've seen Kareem Hunt get involved in some games in the passing game. Noah Gray, I know he's been quiet the last couple of games, but for a lot of this year, especially during the second half, Noah Gray, he's been getting a lot more involved. 2 weeks in a row where he had a 2-touchdown game. He had it against Buffalo and then a week later against Carolina. So you have a lot of guys you can rely on here. And I know there's a possibility of McCole Hardman coming back. Is this a guy that you try to utilize his speed? He does have like the 3rd or 4th highest yard per carry average, which I know does not mean much because he's a wide receiver. But what that tells you is whenever he does run with the football on those end arounds or reverses, which the Chiefs like to do, especially with Worthy, that tells you that the Chiefs could maybe utilize more of that with Hardman in the playoffs if they choose to do so. So I'm just looking at this Chiefs team right now. I feel like the best option is to have Tooney at left tackle, Caliendo at guard, and then the other positions be where they are. I think Juwan Taylor is expected to come back at right tackle. So those are just my thoughts on the offensive line here. I was kind of surprised with the amount of pushback there because the number one thing is to protect Patrick Mahomes. If you're not protecting Patrick Mahomes, what is this offense good for? What is the point of trading for DeAndre Hopkins? What was the point of bringing Hollywood Brown here? What was the point of drafting Xavier Worthy? Because if Mahomes doesn't have the time he needs to get the ball to those guys have no value on this offense. That's just where I'm coming from when it comes to the offensive line and what it should look like in going into the Houston Texans game on Saturday in the divisional round. And by the way, I didn't mention this at the beginning of the podcast. I'm sure you all know by now, but we do know the date and time. It is a Saturday, 3:30 Central Time. Or maybe I did mention it and I just forgot. 3:30 Central Time. It's going to be the game that opens up the divisional round of the NFL playoffs. The Chiefs have never lost a divisional round or a wild card game with Patrick Mahomes as their quarterback. We kind of went over that, mentioning how the Chiefs have reached the AFC Championship game every year, all 6 years with Mahomes. They're hoping to make it 7 for 7. And at that point, you'll be 1 game away from the Super Bowl. And how do the Chiefs win this game and eventually get to the Super Bowl? Got to take care of the football here. When you look at the Chiefs, their first 8 games, they weren't playing very well. They committed 12 turnovers in those first 8 games. Patrick Mahomes, I think he had I think he had committed through 8 interceptions in the first 6 games. I don't have that number in front of me, but I think it's somewhere along those lines. But in general, as a team, the Chiefs have committed 12 turnovers in the first 8 games. In the last 9 games during the second half of the season, only 2 turnovers. And that was in 1 game. Patrick Mahomes on the second play of the game threw a terrible pass against the Buffalo Bills. And then the end of the game when the Chiefs were down by, I think it was 9 points. I can't remember exactly what the score was at that point, but it was a 2-possession game at that point. Patrick Mahomes threw an interception as he was just chucking the ball down the field, which still counts as an interception, but it's one of those situations where he would not throw the ball like that if it was a 1-score game, is my point. But in general, what I'm trying to say is 2 turnovers in the last 9 games. The Chiefs have 0 giveaways in 8 of the last 9 games. Kansas City's been taking much better care of the football lately. It's funny because the first half of the season, everybody outside of Kansas City, they love talking about Patrick Mahomes and how high that interception number is and how he's just not playing as well. And he's without his wide receivers that he was coming into the season with Rice and Hollywood, and Kelsey's not playing as great. It's funny because those same people don't have much to say about the Chiefs after they only committed 2 giveaways in the last 9 games. And both of those were from the same game. That was a Buffalo game. So Kansas City, and by the way, that includes a 38-0 loss to Denver, which I know is not one that a lot of people are putting stock in because everyone knows the situation in that game. But Kansas City's played much better when it's come to ball security. I said this before. What's going to help you in the playoffs or in any football game for that matter? Turnovers. You take care of the football, you will win more times than not. Have we seen situations where the team that commits more turnovers wins a game? Yeah, we have seen that. But that is very, very rare. And yeah, Joshua, you're right in the chat. They're getting takeaways on the defensive side. They've been much better in that area lately. That's been my one big criticism of the defense. They just don't get a lot of takeaways. And they've been getting a lot of those lately. I know Chris Jones, the sack numbers are not there. But he does have, I think, the second most pressures among defensive tackles this year. If you're not getting the sacks, get the next best thing you can get. And Jalen Watson potentially coming back, that would be massive for Kansas City's defense. I still think Kansas City's defense can get by if Josh Williams was the quarterback opposite of Trent McDuffie. But if Jalen Watson comes back, oh boy, Kansas City's defense is going to play much better. Much, much better. And look, I don't know what's going on with Spags and Nagy. I know Spags is the one that nobody wants to lose, but if we're just being honest, he's done a tremendous job as a defensive coordinator the past couple of years. And it certainly earned him an opportunity to go get a second chance as a head coach. That's why you got to do this three-peat, man, because I truly do believe that next year, I still think the Chiefs, if I had to bet on it, they would make the playoffs. I would even bet that they would win the division. But I think there's a possibility that you're not going to win the Super Bowl next season. And I think the streak of reaching the AFC Championship game, I think that comes to an end next year as well. My point is, although there are some young guys that the Chiefs really like, and maybe there's a way, maybe they find a way to keep Hopkins and Hollywood Brown. We'll see. Again, those are all discussions for another time. There's going to be a lot of turnover this offseason with players and potentially coaches, because I can see Spags not only becoming a head coach, but trying to get some of the guys on this defensive staff. I mean, could Brendan Daly be a guy that he takes away from the Chiefs and have him as his defensive coordinator? I would not be shocked by that at all. Not one bit. So I'm just looking at this, and I still think they're going to be a good football team. I'm not sitting here saying that they're going to compete for the number one pick in the draft in the future. Listen, Tom Brady and the Patriots, they went 10 years between Super Bowl wins. Now, they still appeared in the Super Bowl. In fact, those 2 times were against Eli Manning, like we were talking about earlier. But even Tom Brady, he went through that Super Bowl drought for a while. So, it's okay if Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs go through that for a little bit. That's why I'm saying you got to do this three-peat. Because I'll tell you right now, if it happens, I couldn't care less what happens next year. Because you can live with the fact that this team was able to pull off that three-peat at the end of the day. So we'll see what happens. Obviously, all of that we'll discuss more later on in the week. I know the Vikings-Rams game, that is starting up, and I'm sure a lot of you guys want to get out of here and watch that game. So real quickly, I do want to go over Wild Card Weekend from the 5 games that we have seen and just give you guys my quick thoughts on those games right there. The Chargers and the Texans. This is the one that was a surprise to me. By the way, this is the only game I got wrong over the weekend in terms of win-losses here. The other one I completely missed on was the Buffalo Bills-Broncos game. The Chargers-Texans one, I don't know, man. I'm seeing a lot of criticism surrounding Justin Herbert, comparisons to Phillip Rivers, essentially saying that this guy's a great regular season quarterback and can't get it done in the playoffs. When you look at the second half of the Jaguars game where they blew that massive lead and the entire game against the Texans, it just hasn't been good. Even when they had that miracle touchdown pass, and I can't remember who he threw that to in the fourth quarter, even when you got that touchdown, something bad still had to happen where the kick was blocked, the PAT was blocked, the kicker's trying to toss it down like it's an incomplete pass when that's not how it works. And he got drilled by a blocker on the team that recovered the kick on that play, which was just all sorts of ugly. Look, it's the first year under Jim Harbaugh, okay? Jim Harbaugh is a great coach. I don't think he's going to let it be. I don't think he's going to let Herbert stay like that his entire career. I do think Herbert will figure it out. Keep in mind, this guy's gone through a lot of head coaches. Look at Trevor Lawrence. They just fired Doug Peterson. I mean, that guy's going to be going through his 3rd head coach now, and this guy was next? What was the label on him? The quarterback of a generation or something like that. Yeah. I mean, that never helps. I do think Jim Harbaugh is going to be there for a long time. So give it a little bit of time, and I think he'll figure it out. I do think the Chargers are going to stick around. The Chargers and the Broncos both. They're going to stick around for a long time in the AFC West. The fact that the Chiefs went 5-0 in the AFC West, and I'm not including the last game because obviously it was the Chiefs playing a preseason game while the Broncos were trying to win the game. I mean, the Chiefs, the starters went undefeated against the AFC West. A very competitive AFC West this year, because you can no longer sit here and say the Chiefs skated by another easy division. Nope. You had 3 teams with double-digit wins this year. Rough ending for the Chargers, but I do think they figure it out. We'll touch on the Texans more later on in the week. Steelers, Ravens, nothing too surprising in this one here. The Ravens, I mean, they just dominated this game. The Steelers had just 2 first downs in the first half. They got going a little bit in the third quarter, but it was too little, too late. The Ravens were just way too much for the Steelers, so no surprises in that game. Bills, Broncos, this was a very popular game in terms of an upset here. A lot of people out there thought Denver was going to pull it off here. I said the Buffalo Bills would win this game, but I did say that this would be a very close game. Look, the score was 10-7 at halftime. So even though the Bills, first of all, the Broncos, outside of the first drive, which was amazing, the Broncos just looked like garbage the rest of the game, offensively speaking. I do think the Broncos defense did everything it could have done to keep this game competitive. Yeah, I mean, I know a lot of people are going to look at the box score and say, 31 points. Allen was 20 of 26, 272 yards, 2 touchdowns. Yeah, but you got to look at halftime. The Broncos were doing everything they could have done defensively to not let the Bills light up the scoreboard. I think a lot of times when you see blowout games like this, it's so easy to say, okay, well, the team that lost, I mean, they just did nothing right. When I don't think that's the case at all. I really like Denver's defense. I really do. And all this talk, oh, should the Broncos get rid of Vance Joseph? That is the dumbest thing I've heard from Wildcard Weekend. I mean, that defense is a huge reason why the Broncos got to where they are today. And I think, I'm a believer. I like Bo Nix. Just a rookie who's, getting his feet wet. A lot of youth on that offense. A lot of youth. Unfortunately, they just could not return the favor for the defense, and that allowed the Bills to take this game completely away from the Broncos. In fact, it kind of reminds me of the Chiefs and Bills game from earlier this season, where the Chiefs defense, they kept getting stops, but the Chiefs offense could not do anything until it was too little too late. Packers Eagles, this one I thought we'd see more offense in this one here. And Saquon Barkley, just doing his thing there. Jordan Love, really, really rough game in this one. 3 picks from Jordan Love. Look, I don't think Jordan Love's a bad quarterback here. Just went up against a really good Eagles defense. And I mentioned yesterday morning some of those Eagles players, and Zach Ball, some of those guys, they came to play. Slay. Jordan Love is still fairly young. He's only started 2 years in the NFL. I think they'll figure it out. Just a rough showing. I just think the Eagles were the much better football team, and they showed it in that game right there. Commanders, Buccaneers. I said this would be the most exciting game of the weekend, and that's exactly what happened. It lived up to the hype. Just a great game. Back and forth, these two teams were going at it. You had no idea who was going to win this football game, and I think that's what makes for a great playoff game. And that's exactly what this game was between the Commanders and the Bucs. I'm a big fan of Baker Mayfield. I never really understood the criticism about him coming out of college. There are very few professional athletes I ever feel bad for. I felt bad for Baker Mayfield for how, the Browns just completely screwed him over and obviously made a massive mistake doing what they did, picking Watson over Baker. And the restructuring of the deal. I think that just says everything you need to know. And I guess he had re-aggravated the injury recently, so his 2025 season is even in question right now. Yeah. I just, I've never hated Baker Mayfield. I've always liked the guy. The Commanders, boy, Jaden Daniels, that dude is a rookie and plays like a grown-ass man who's been in the league 10 years. This guy's going to be a problem for a long time. He really is. Look, I'm not betting on I'm not betting any money on the Commanders to do this. I don't think they're going to beat Detroit, but I do think they're going to make it close. But if there was ever a time we could see a rookie get to a Super Bowl, is this not the Commanders team that could do it? I'm not saying it will happen, but I am entertaining the idea. I think they're certainly capable of it. Jaden Daniels just finds a way to win you these close games. He just does. And I think that's what makes the Commanders a scary football team. I like what I've seen from the Commanders, and I think they're going to continue that for many years to come. Maybe not for the rest of the postseason, but boy, they certainly have the recipe to pull off an upset if they want to. So those are my thoughts. As far as tonight's game, listen, I really like both offenses, especially their wide receivers. I'm a big fan of the Rams and that offense right there. They have been involved in some low-scoring games lately, so that is a concern to me. The Vikings, on the other hand, Sam Darnold coming off his worst game of the year with the inaccuracy on that Sunday Night Football game, that would have made a big difference in that football game. It certainly would have, and we probably would see Detroit right now instead of Minnesota. But man, I'm just looking at that Minnesota defense. Nobody talks about Minnesota's defense. I feel like the conversation with Minnesota is, wow, look how they got to this point with Sam Darnold. Nobody talks about, Justin Jefferson gets some love, but nobody talks about the actual reason why Minnesota is a 14-win football team. They lead the NFL in interceptions with 24 and have the most takeaways in the NFL. By the way, no one else in the NFL has 20 interceptions or more. And only Minnesota has more than 20 picks. Rams touchdown on the opening drive. Okay. I'm talking to you guys. I'm about to wrap up here, so I didn't know that. But That's going against everything I'm saying so far. But obviously still a lot of game left to play. But man, I just think people really do underestimate this Minnesota Vikings team. That's all. It's more than just, oh my God, Sam Darnold, what a story. It's more than just that. I do think Sam Darnold is auditioning for 2025, though. I really do think he is. He's been talked about and not in a good way. I think people are just struggling to come to terms that he's having a good year. I mean, he's not an MVP. He's not, Lamar, Mahomes, Burrow, or Allen. I mean, he's certainly not one of those quarterbacks, but didn't everyone write off this team? I think that's a huge reason why Kevin O'Connell is going to win Coach of the Year, because nobody thought the Vikings would even come close to where they are right now. Playoff team that sneaks in maybe 14 wins in a very competitive division. Yeah, that's impressive. So I like the Vikings story. I hope they pull it off. I think they will. I think it's going to be a close one. My score prediction for that one is 27-24. We'll see how that ends. All right, guys. My name is Farzin Vousoughian. Thank you for joining me for this episode of the Chiefs Zone Podcast. Reminder, tomorrow, 9 o'clock Central Time, the Chiefs Zone Podcast comes back. So in a little over 24 hours, it'll be me. It'll be Zach Steginga. It'll be Mark Van Sickle from KCMO. We'll be on here talking some Chiefs football with you guys. Wednesday, it'll be Farscast. Thursday, we will have the Chiefs Zone Podcast. We'll break down the game. We'll preview the game between the Chiefs and the Texans. I'll give you my prediction for that one. And then Friday evening, we'll have our Red Friday live chat. Saturday morning, we'll have the pregame live chat. And of course, the halftime and the postgame podcast where you guys can call in. So we're going to have live streams every single day this week, you guys. Every single day. It's a playoffs. You got to do it. Okay, guys. I'm Farzin Vousoughian. Thank you all for joining me for this episode of the Chiefs Zone Podcast. Enjoy Monday Night Football. I'm out. Peace.